So UFC Fight Night Aspinall versus Tybura takes place in London this weekend, and it's a card I'm really looking forward to because there's 15 fights on the card. I do love long cards. I do love cards with more than 12 fights. I mean, I just love fights. I love watching the UFC. And speaking of watching the UFC, you can watch the UFC with me on a live fight companion on YouTube. It starts at 4 a.m. for me, so it really could be an interesting experience. But I will be up at 4 a.m. this morning watching this matchup and watching this card. So definitely do tune into my YouTube channel for that fight companion. And then before we do get into it though, you can sign up to the We Want Picks premium membership service on their website. You can get a 3-day free trial by signing up with the code ARTEM. Get access to all of these sorts of things here. The We Want Picks bets, you get access to my article. I've got an AI fight tracker over there as well. Lots of different things you can get for 3 days for free. And then if you do like it, you can pay $10 per month to get access to everything for a whole month. And now let's get into the first fight of the night. It's going to be Jafel Filho versus Daniel Barez. I am going with Daniel Barez in this matchup. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people on Jafel Filho, and I do completely understand. He is the better grappler in this matchup. Daniel Barez, in my opinion, is the better striker and the better wrestler. Will we see a lot of offensive wrestling from Daniel Barez? I hope not. I hope we don't see Daniel Barez going out there and trying to take down Jafel Filho. Personally, it's not what I'd really like to see from them. I would rather see Daniel Barez go out there and try and just kickbox with Jafel Filho, because Daniel Barez has insane leg kicks, very powerful leg kicks. He's very powerful on the feet as well. I did pick him to win on Dana White's Contender Series when he lost a split decision to Carlos Hernandez, but since then I've been following him because I thought it would be kind of cool to have him in the UFC because I think he's a fun fighter. He hasn't fought anybody that great, like a lot of losing records recently, a lot of pretty spotty records, and he's been very aggressive against these fighters. He's been going out there and just landing bombs and knocking them all out, which is what you want to see. You do want to see someone as good as Daniel Barez knocking out that level of competition, but it doesn't really tell me how does Daniel Barez kind of deal against someone his own skill set, and we're going to find out this weekend. So Jafel Filho, in my opinion, is a very good striker himself, but I don't think he's as good on the feet as Daniel Barez, but I think he's got very good lights-out grappling. We saw that against Muhammad Bakayev, but I do believe we can see Daniel Barez go out there and get the KO over Jafel Filho this weekend. It is worth noting, though, that if this fight ends for Jafel Filho, it's going to be by submission. For Daniel Barez, it's going to be by KO. I don't think this fight goes to the scorecards. I do think Daniel Barez finds the knockout. I think he's very underrated on Tapology, only 14%. Going with Daniel Barez, I do believe Barez goes out there and finds a slight upset. I mean, a big upset in terms of Tapology votes, but a small upset in terms of the betting odds. And now let's move on to the next fight. It's going to be Bruna Brasil versus Shauna Bannon, a striking matchup between two women's strawweights. It should be a very entertaining one. Bruna Brasil, a good Muay Thai striker. I believe, I could be wrong, a Brazilian national Muay Thai champion, or I think she was like a regional Muay Thai champion. I could be wrong, but I did find that out about her when I was looking in there. The source didn't look too strong, but for Shauna Bannon, I saw from multiple sources she is a 5-time kickboxing world champion under WAKO, which, if you guys wanted to know a fun fact about me, is the group of kickboxing that I trained under for quite a few years before I got surgery on my jaw and my leg. I trained WAKO kickboxing all the way from high school until my first year of university. So I know a little bit about WAKO kickboxing, I guess. I believe in USA, it's ISKO kickboxing or ISKA kickboxing. But yeah, it's just a different group of kickboxing, I guess, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But the point is, Shauna Bannon's a very good kickboxer, and you can see it in her fights. The problem is, though, it's going to sound really stupid, but I think she does fight a little bit too much like a kickboxer in some of her fights, because I'm watching her MMA fights, and she does stuff which you do in kickboxing, but you wouldn't do in an MMA fight. Like, she would throw like double head kicks and triple head kicks, and what I mean by that is like using a head kick almost as a jab. So what you do is you lean back, you kick someone in the head, and then you bring your leg back, and you just kick them again. I mean, and you're balancing and just kicking them, and Shauna Bannon does that in MMA, which is cool to watch because no one else really does it. But the problem is, it's going to potentially get you caught by a takedown or a counter or just something that maybe an MMA fighter could utilize, like definitely a takedown or a trip or something like that. So she can get caught potentially by doing that. She's never been caught by doing that, but it's something that I wanted to note in case you see Shauna Bannon hopping around on one leg trying to kick someone in the head constantly. It's just because she's a very good kickboxer. But Bruna Brasil, before, she does not deal well being pressured at all. I mean, we saw that against Denise Gomes. I want to shout out Jacob from We Want Picks. He called this fight absolutely perfectly. I picked Bruna Brasil. Denise Gomes made me look like an idiot and pretty much everybody else, but Denise Gomes went out there, put the pressure on Bruna Brasil, and Bruna Brasil could not handle it whatsoever. And I think Shauna Bannon can watch that fight of Denise Gomes and think that she can do the same thing. Because every time I'm watching Shauna Bannon fight, for the most part, she's trying to be the one that's walking forward. She's trying to be the one that's landing the volume. She doesn't have the most KO power in the world, but I think that she might be able to hurt Bruna Brasil maybe at one point with a big shot. It's worth noting that all three of Bruna Brasil's losses are by KO, which is interesting, but they have been to pretty good competition earlier on into her career. I'm going to go Shauna Bannon to win a decision here. I think she can push Bruna Brasil back. Bruna Brasil does not look like she likes being pressured whatsoever. And I'm going to trust Shauna Bannon to kind of utilize a game plan which involves in her trying to be the fighter that's pressuring forward, pushing Bruna Brasil back, landing big shots, making Bruna Brasil very uncomfortable, maybe even a little bit of clinch potentially, just to make Bruna Brasil even more uncomfortable. I'm going to go Shauna Bannon by decision in this matchup here. I believe she's the underdog betting odds-wise, but the favorite on the Tapology votes. The next one is going to be between Chris Duncan and Yanal Ashmouz. I'm going to say it. I'm a little bit scared with the amount of people picking Chris Duncan. I'm seeing so many people picking Chris Duncan. I'm on the Yanal Ashmouz side. Personally, I just can't trust Chris Duncan, man. I really can't. I've seen this guy get KO'd, flatlined. I've seen this guy get rocked all around the place. I don't think he's got good striking defense. I don't trust his chin at the moment either. He's absolutely gigantic for 155 pounds. He didn't look all that great in his UFC debut, in my opinion, either against Omar Morales. He made it a close fight. He used his offensive wrestling in that one there and just got by a 37-year-old Omar Morales. I mean, there's so many just little red flags for me that scares me away from Chris Duncan. Now, the thing with Yanal Ashmouz is the whole time they've been talking about how he's a wrestler, but he's not really, because for the most part, this guy's a striker, and the problem is he's not very technical on the feet either. Like, he's pretty sloppy on the feet. He throws power, but he doesn't wrestle as his main priority. His wrestling seems to be like his last resort sort of thing, and he does have it in the back pocket, but he's not going to be... I wouldn't be surprised, but I wouldn't expect Yanal Ashmouz to go out there against Chris Duncan and just try and take him down consistently. I think Yanal Ashmouz actually is the one that wants to fight on the feet, and Chris Duncan's probably the one that wants to fight on the ground. But I think Yanal Ashmouz can defend takedowns if he has to. I think he can also knock out Chris Duncan. I think this fight does spill a pretty good kind of stylistic matchup for Ashmouz. We saw him KO Sam Patterson. We know he's got power in those hands. He's a little bit sloppy, but he can get scrappy. And I think if these guys get into a scrap, if these guys get into a brawl, I think Chris Duncan's the guy that's probably going to come off second best. I just don't trust the striking defense. I don't trust that chin either. I think Yanal Ashmouz goes out there, swings like a maniac, and something lands. I think he does find the KO in this matchup. Once again, the favorite on Tapology, but the underdog in the betting odds. It will be interesting to see how this fight plays out this weekend. Ketlen Viera taking on Pannie Kianzad. I'm going to pick the first favorite of the card for me. I'm going with Ketlen Viera in this matchup. Now, Pannie Kianzad, she is a striker for the most part. She can work in takedowns. She doesn't do it often, but she can. She doesn't mind the clinch too much, but for the most part, she does want to fight at range. And Ketlen Viera is an odd fighter to explain because she's a striker that can clinch, that can grapple as well. She does average more than one takedown a fight, which does tell you that she's wanting to get the fight down to the ground. She probably can do that against Pannie Kianzad. I think Ketlen Viera will be the bigger fighter in there. Both girls are pretty big for one's 135 pounds, though, to be fair. But I think Ketlen Viera, she might land less volume than Pannie Kianzad, who is a technical striker, but I think when she does land, she's going to be landing with more power. She's going to be doing more damage. I think she can be stronger in the clinch as well. I think she can get a takedown if she has to. We saw Pannie Kianzad come to a very close fight against Lena Landsberg. It wasn't super close, but she made it too close. Like, she got dropped in that matchup by an elbow, exiting the clinch, I believe it was. She also is a fighter that doesn't like being pressured. She doesn't like getting pushed back. And Ketlen Viera's whole sort of game is pressuring and pushing you up against the cage. I think this is a pretty good stylistic matchup for Ketlen Viera and a good fight to get Ketlen Viera maybe back in that top 5, that top 3, that title shot contention conversation. I think she's still a couple of fights away coming off that loss against Raquel Pennington, which a lot of people, I believe, thought that Viera won. But I think Viera wins this fight by decision. I think it could be a split decision. I mean, as I said, Pannie Kianzad was probably going to land more volume. She's probably going to be more technical. But I think Viera might win like a very close decision. This might be a split that could go either way. It's just one of those women's bantamweights fights, which there's probably going to be a lot of clinching. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, really. I'm not the best at picking women's fights, but I do believe that this is a good stylistic matchup for Ketlen Viera to get a win here. Now, speaking of stylistic matchups, I don't like Bryan Barberena's chances against Makhmud Muradov in this matchup personally. I don't like that he's going up to 185 pounds from 170. He never seemed to be a guy that struggled to make the weight class because he was taking fights on short notice. No disrespect to Bryan Barberena, but it's not like he's shredded, like, out of his mind, like Aljamain Sterling, for example, you know. It just seems like a weird move to 185 pounds, unless he's put on, like, a lot of muscle in the last 3 months, which I'll be surprised at. I don't know how he's going to look at 185 pounds. As I said, no disrespect to Bryan Barberena, but he's not built like Francis Ngannou, for example. You know, he's not like super bulk and buff, whereas Makhmud Muradov is a big, he's not super big for the weight class, but he's a decent size for 185 pounds. He's an absolute savage. I mean, at one point, he's on a 14-fight win streak. A lot of KO wins on his record. He used some offensive wrestling against Caio Borrello, which was interesting, but it tells you that he can take down Bryan Barberena. And what is Bryan Barberena's biggest weakness? Takedown defense and grappling defense. What he's good at on the feet is volume, very high volume striking. He's willing to engage in a brawl. He's got good eyes in the pocket as well. But man, I think even if he engages in a brawl with Makhmud Muradov, Muradov's the bigger guy, the more technical striker in my opinion, the more powerful striker in my opinion. Bryan Barberena is not a guy that's KOing everybody with one punch. Whereas Makhmud Muradov, maybe not doing the same thing himself, but he has done it in the past anyway. But I think Makhmud Muradov can mix in wrestling in this matchup. I think he can take down Bryan Barberena. I think he can knock him out on the feet. I don't like the move to 185. I think the stylistic matchup is awkward for Bryan Barberena, to say the least as well. I think the move to 185 pounds, to put it bluntly, is an awkward move. I don't really know how I feel about it. I mean, maybe he looks fantastic at 185. Maybe the weight cut is harder than we thought it was. But I think there's definitely better matchups for Bryan Barberena out there. I'm going to go with Makhmud Muradov. I think he does find a KO, but I do think it might be late in the fight. I think early on he's going to use some wrestling to kind of wear down Bryan Barberena and maybe test out his own wrestling and grappling. And then we've got Mick Parkin taking on Jamal Pogues. I don't really know how to feel about Mick Parkin, and the reason why I say that is just because this guy has never really fought anybody that great. I mean, even his amateur career, most of his wins as an amateur are against guys with losing amateur records, which is interesting. Like, once again, he's dominating these guys, which you do love to see. And then when he fought Dana White's Contender Series, before that Dana White's Contender Series fight, this guy never fought anybody with a winning record. He'd fought a guy with an even record, 7-7. That was the best record of anybody that he'd ever fought. And then he went out there against Eduardo Neves, kind of brawled with Eduardo Neves for a little bit, kind of defended a takedown, went for his own takedown. There's a little bit of clinch. A lot happened in less than 2 minutes, I tell you what. And one thing that did happen was Eduardo Neves gassed out in 90 seconds. He was gassed in 90 seconds. It was unbelievable. Now, Mick Parkin hasn't fought since then. Maybe that was a smart move. Maybe he's made rapid improvements, because I do believe he's been training with Tom Aspinall and also a couple of other big name Europeans that I just can't think of right now. But I know he's been getting some good training in. He's young for 265 pounds, so I understand it. But I'm going to go with Jamal Pogues in this matchup. It's just because I can trust him a little bit more. Like Mick Parkin, I can tell you what he does. Mick Parkin's a guy that likes to clinch. He can brawl on the feet. He likes to get takedowns as well. He's got good grappling, got slick grappling when it gets down to the ground. But he's doing it all against low-level competition. Whereas Jamal Pogues, he's been incredibly inactive. He literally come off the couch to fight Paulo Renato Jr. The man that fought Tim Hiley and the man that fought Paulo Renato Jr. looked completely different. He put on like 60 pounds of not muscle, to put it nicely, and he went out there and he beat Paulo Renato Jr. on very short notice. Very good. Paulo Renato Jr. was a former Brazilian kickboxing champion, which is crazy because he went out there and lost to Jamal Pogues, who like just threw a jab for the most part. And then Jamal Pogues went out there and beat Josh Breezy and using his wrestling. I think Jamal Pogues is a good ceiling at 265 pounds. I like his ceiling at 265 a lot more than light heavyweight. If you guys don't know, he used to fight at light heavyweight, but he's put on a lot of weight since then. Now, I think Jamal Pogues can go out there and wrestle Mick Parkin. I think he can strike with Mick Parkin. I like Jamal Pogues. He's somewhat technical as a striker, especially at heavyweight. He fights behind a jab a lot. He's got good kickboxing. He's got very good wrestling. I think that could come in part against Mick Parkin. He'll get offensive takedowns. He could defend takedowns from Mick Parkin. I'm going to go Jamal Pogues to win this matchup by decision in this fight. Now we've got Marc Diakiese taking on Joel Alvarez. The big talk in this matchup is the takedown defense of Joel Alvarez, because it's not very good, is it? In fact, I don't think he's ever defended a takedown in the UFC, which is not very good, is it? But Marc Diakiese is a guy who's been taking down everybody. He's just become D1 Diakiese, which was crazy. I mean, out of nowhere, he was a Muay Thai striker, and then he just decided to take everybody down. And the first sort of sign of him trying this game plan was against Rafael Alvarez when he went for a takedown and got subbed by a guillotine. And then we saw it against Borchev. He dominated Borchev with takedowns. He dominated Damir Hadzovic with takedowns. He went out there against Michael Johnson, couldn't get the takedowns and looked a little bit lost on the feet. It was a weird sort of fight, which Michael Johnson kind of just outclassed Marc Diakiese. Joel Alvarez is a guy that's a fantastic grappler. He's fantastic on the feet as well. But man, he's massive for the weight class as well. You've got to bring that up. He's probably one of the biggest lightweights on the roster. He might even be bigger than Jalen Turner, which is crazy, but he genuinely might be. He's coming off that loss against Arman Tsarukyan, which was a pretty rough break because he got split open badly in the first elbow that Arman Tsarukyan threw, and once again couldn't defend the takedown and just got dominated on the ground, which was crazy. He went out there and beat Thiago Moises, though, which is a great win. Beat Yakovlev with a submission, a defensive submission. I think there's a good chance that he gets a defensive submission against Marc Diakiese, or he knocks him out on the feet. We haven't seen Alvarez for a long time. He's been out for over a year, almost a year and a half. I think we see Joel Alvarez come out there a little bit more improved. I think he can actually latch up a guillotine or some sort of defensive submission against Marc Diakiese. And I think Alvarez gets a finish in this matchup on the feet or on the ground. I mean, Diakiese is a great striker. I mean, he's a great wrestler all of a sudden as well. But Joel Alvarez is a big guy. I mean, we might actually see Joel Alvarez defend the takedown against Diakiese because he's so massive and so much bigger than Diakiese, who's coming up a weight class. So I've got Joel Alvarez by finish in this matchup. And now we've got Danny Roberts versus Jonny Parsons. And this is just one of those fights, man, which I have no idea. I'm the pretty honest guy. This is one of those fights. So I am picking Danny Roberts, but I want you guys to know this is the lowest confidence pick on the card, and I am in absolutely no way, shape, or form giving you guys advice to bet on Danny Roberts, because I do not know what's going to happen in this matchup. And you might think, oh well, that sounds like really, I guess, like unprofessional, or like you guys didn't do your research. But I'm telling you guys, Jonny Parsons hasn't fought for almost 2 years. And he's a pure Muay Thai striker, for the most part. That's kind of what he does. And before that, you know, he was somewhat active. He's the coach at Syndicate MMA, the Muay Thai coach at Syndicate MMA. He rocks a beautiful mullet as well. I don't know if he's still got it, but it's definitely an inspiration to a guy like me who's currently in the midst of growing out the big mullet. And I think Jonny Parsons, he's done it well. He's rocking the mullet. He looks fantastic with the mullet. I would say it's one of the better mullets on the UFC roster, personally. But as I said, Jonny Parsons, though, for the most part, he is a pure Muay Thai striker, and he's good at doing that, and he's small for the weight class as well. He's 5'9". He's coming off a lot of injuries as well. Well, I don't know if they're injuries. I think he said in an interview, thanks to Fight Night Picks, actually, I found this out, but he's got concussion issues. He's been kind of injured, like he was having concussion symptoms. He got knocked out cold 6 weeks before he fought Solomon Renfro. I mean, there's a few little things that I just don't like about this matchup going into Jonny Parsons, but Danny Roberts, we all know that Danny Roberts has no chin. I mean, this guy might not have been KO'd by Francisco Trinaldo, but everything Trinaldo landed, Danny Roberts was all over the place, man. He was rocked, absolutely senseless, all over the place. Well, not really like that, but he was getting hurt by Trinaldo, who was a GOAT. He's one of the greatest of all time, but, I mean, and then he went out there against Jack Della Maddalena, gets KO'd. I mean, everyone thought he was going to get KO'd in that matchup. Danny Roberts has no chin. Jonny Roberts is a pure Muay Thai striker. Put them two together, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe Parsons knocks him out and I look like the biggest idiot in the world, but I'm going to go Danny Roberts. I mean, Danny Roberts, I just know what he brings to the table. He can wrestle, he can grapple, he is pretty low volume on the feet, but he's still technical. I don't want him to get into a brawl with Jonny Parsons. I would rather see Danny Roberts kind of fight this fight slow and steady, maybe even work in a takedown or two, because as I said, Jonny Parsons is a pure Muay Thai striker. So there's a lot of sort of things that could go into this matchup, but I'm going to be going with Danny Roberts to win this fight, but man, it is a low confidence pick. And oh man, we're going back to back with the low confidence picks. Davey Grant versus Daniel Marcos. I'm going with Davey Grant. I don't trust Daniel Marcos yet. It's going to take a while for me to trust him, because I want you guys to know this. It's a little bit embarrassing, but hindsight is 2020. I picked Daniel Marcos to lose against Brandon Lewis. I thought Brandon Lewis was going to win that fight. And you might think, oh, that was dumb. He's 12-0. But yeah, it was his first fight in about 2.5 years. This guy didn't fight for 2.5 years. I have no idea what this guy was up to, what he was doing. And then even in the guys that he was fighting in Peru, they look like they've got good records. But you watch these guys and you think, like, Daniel Marcos is 5'7". I guarantee you this. I would be surprised if Gaston Manzo was taller than 5'2". He was so much smaller than Daniel Marcos. I couldn't believe it. And so was his opponent, Gabriel Pimenta. Like, these guys were so small compared to Marcos, and they were absolutely nowhere near as skilled. Like, Daniel Marcos was just beating these guys up easily, and I was like, man, like, it's not really, like, it's a good look, but, like, how can I trust this guy? And then he went out there. I picked him to beat Simon Oliveira, because Simon Oliveira's got no striking whatsoever, and he won that fight. That was great, but now he's taken up a big step up in competition in Davy Grant, and Davy Grant is a guy that tests everybody. You know, he fought Marlon Vera. I think it was somewhat competitive a decision. I think that fight was in London, but then he fought Adrian Yanez, and that was a very competitive fight as well. I mean, Adrian Yanez had a lot of problems in that matchup. A lot of people think that Davy Grant could have won that fight as well. Grant is a tricky guy. Now, he didn't look that good against Rafael Sunsao. There's a little bit of controversy in that fight as well, just before the finish, but I mean, he still beat Rafael Sunsao, was a tough guy. He went to absolute war with Lewis Smolka. I mean, this guy threw down. Like, they went to war together. But I'm going to go Davy Grant. I think Davy Grant can mix it up against Daniel Marcos. I mean, he could take down Daniel Marcos potentially. He's not really a grappler whatsoever, but he can make it look close on the feet as well. I mean, I think he might even be able to get the better on the feet. Daniel Marcos is going to be faster, but I'm not sold on this guy yet, man. Like, if he gets past Davy Grant, I might have to jump on the Daniel Marcos hype train, but I'm still just not too sold on Daniel Marcos. I know he trains under Charles Rosa. He trains at Charles Rosa's gym. You see Charles Rosa in his corner. You see Charles Rosa on his Instagram. All sorts of things. But yeah, I'm going to go Davy Grant. It's just one of those things. I just don't trust Daniel Marcos just yet. And I know I see a really nice 14-0 record, but I'm still not that sold. I know Davy Grant didn't look that great against the Sunsao, but he tests all of these up-and-coming guys. And I think Davy Grant, I mean, fueled by the London crowd as well. He hasn't fought for London in a long time. I think he might get it done. I'm going to go Davy Grant to beat Daniel Marcos in this matchup. And then we move up the card. Lerone Murphy taking on Joshua Calabell. Low confidence pick again. Man, I've got a three-leg stretch of low confidence picks. Oh man, this is not what the people come to see, but I'm an honest person. Lerone Murphy, I'm picking him to beat Joshua Calabell here. Joshua Calabell is scrappy though, and anything really can happen in MMA. And Joshua Calabell, I guarantee you, is going to be coming out there with a pretty good game plan. And I would not be that surprised if we see Joshua Calabell try and wrestle and take down Lerone Murphy because of all of the success that Gabriel Santos managed to have on the feet in that matchup. Santos had a lot of success in the grappling, a lot of success in the wrestling, the pure jiu-jitsu. It was a big switch up in competition for Lerone Murphy though, to be fair. He was training to fight against Nathaniel Wood, but Lerone Murphy, he shouldn't have made it that close against Gabriel Santos in my opinion. Now, I mean, I love Gabriel Santos. I thought Gabriel Santos won that fight, but I wasn't that impressed by Lerone Murphy in that performance whatsoever. So I think now he's going to have to maybe like prove himself, quote unquote, against Joshua Calabell now, who's an up-and-coming guy, found himself on a fantastic win streak. Shayla Nurdembeki, Sungwoo Choi, and Malsik Bagdasarian are three really good wins. Now, the Sungwoo Choi win unfortunately hasn't aged that well, but it's still a good win. They both went to war. It was a fun fight. But Lerone Murphy, I think he can beat Joshua Calabell here. I think on the feet, I think he can be more technical, and I think he can land the more damaging shots and more volume. I think the fight goes the distance, though. I think we go to a decision. And once again, it's going to be a close fight. I do think this is going to be close. So give me Lerone Murphy to beat Joshua Calabell by decision. But I'm telling you guys, man, Calabell could be a live underdog here. The odds are not very wide for a reason. And now I'm going to be moving on to Jai Herbert versus Freeze Yam. And in this matchup, I'm going to be going with Freeze Yam. I think he's the favorite now. I think the odds have flipped. But I do believe that Freeze Yam can beat Jai Herbert for some reason, man. I don't know what quite it was. But Freeze Yam, man, this guy made some rapid improvements between his last fight. I mean, he lost to Terrence McKinney. Didn't look that great. I think he even got released by the UFC in that match. After that matchup. He come back against Mikhail Figlak, and he beat Mikhail Figlak. He looked really, really good against Mikhail Figlak. That fight was in France. I thought he looked absolutely fantastic in that matchup. And I think he can go out there and beat Jai Herbert. I think he can go out there and mix in the wrestling and the grappling that he did against Mikhail Figlak. He looked so technical on the feet. He just looked really, really improved. He looked like a much better version of himself. Now, Joe Herbert's a very good striker, a pure striker for the most part. Now, he's very powerful on the feet. We saw him knock down Ilia Topuria in a crazy fight. One of the greatest shots that has ever landed that hasn't KO'd someone. And that was Joe Herbert landed against Ilia Topuria. But since then, he beat Kyle Nelson, which was cool. And then he beat Ludovic Klein. Well, maybe could have beaten Ludovic Klein. It was a draw because I think there's a point deduction in there. But I think Freeze Young goes out there, uses that wrestling and grappling that he's got. And I think that we see Freeze Young go out there and win a decision over Joe Herbert. I mean, just all of a sudden, Freeze Young, he's made rapid improvements. And what's to say that he stopped making rapid improvements? I think he can go out there and beat Joe Herbert in this matchup. And now we move on to Andre Muniz versus Paul Craig. Oh man, I'm going with Andre Muniz. And it's just one of those ones, man, because Jacob from UFC Picks has got Paul Craig as his lock of the week. And I don't know, Jacob. I don't know. I thought there were a bit of underdogs to pick. I'm picking a lot of underdogs on this card. I'm not too sure how I feel about the Paul Craig pick. However, if Paul Craig wins, I'll make a public apology to Jacob about this one because I am going to go with Andre Muniz. I'm not that confident in Andre Muniz as I was against Victoria Dudakova versus Estela Nunez. But I do believe Andre Muniz can win this fight. I don't like Paul Craig getting this fight down at 185 pounds. I don't know how he's going to look at 185. I never saw Paul Craig weigh in at 205 pounds and think, man, like this guy, I could see him fighting 185 pounds. I think this guy should go down a weight class. He's definitely never been in that category for me at all. I think Jimmy Crute is in that category. I don't think Paul Craig is. So who knows how he's going to look down at 185 pounds. Man, I'm sorry, guys. But I think Andre Muniz, he's been working on his striking. His striking's getting better. I thought he looks pretty good on the feet against Brendan Allen in that matchup. He looked very improved on the feet against Brendan Allen. He did get submitted later on, but I think if this fight is stuck on the feet, I think Andre Muniz is going to be the one scoring points. I think Andre Muniz might even be able to catch Paul Craig. He's got a pretty bad chin. He's been KO'd before. Volkan Oezdemir kind of beats him up on the feet. And Paul Craig, you know, all the guys that he's been submitting, are these guys good grapplers? Like Nikita Krylov was just stupid. Oh, I love Krylov. That was a sad one. He beat Shogun Hua in a rematch. He beat Gadzimira Vantigulov. He beat Jamal Hill. Like, these guys, in hindsight, hindsight's always 2020. They haven't been aging well wins. You know, Andre Muniz has been beating good guys at 185 pounds. And one thing that we do know is maybe middleweight's an exception, but guys that move down a weight class tend to not do so well because they seem to be more technical down a weight class than they are up a weight class. But maybe 185 is just that little hole, that little black hole, because we all know how bad middleweight is as a division. Pretty much the top 15 of all of middleweight has come from like a lower division at 170 pounds, which is crazy. But anyway, I think Andre Muniz does beat Paul Craig here. I wouldn't be surprised if he knocks him out. I wouldn't be too surprised if he even submits him. I wouldn't be too surprised if he wins a decision. I'm going to go with Andre Muniz. I think all Paul Craig has is like a Hail Mary submission, because I don't know how he's going to look trying to take down Andre Muniz. Now, I don't know how good Andre Muniz takedown defense is going to be, but I think he can beat Paul Craig up on the feet. I think he can even get it done on the grappling as well. It's going to be an interesting fight. I don't really know how to feel about it, but it'd be interesting to see what kind of happens. Now we've got Nathaniel Wood taking on Andre Fili. Nathaniel Wood is very technical. He's a boxer. He's a very high guard. He does pick his shots very well. Very technical fighter as well. Not super high volume because he's technical. And he's not a high volume striker because he's technical and he picks his shots well. Now, Andre Fili is a little bit more of a brawler. I would say Andre Fili is the more aggressive fighter in this one here. I think Wood's going to be going for a lot of counters. I think Wood is going to be fighting behind a jab, whereas Andre Fili might be a little bit more aggressive. Both guys can grapple. Both guys can wrestle and grapple. But Nathaniel Wood recently, he's moved up to 145 pounds. And I'm not the biggest fan of it. I do like Nathaniel Wood a lot more at 135 pounds than I do at 145. I just don't think he's that big for this weight class, man. He's quite small. And in this matchup, he's going to be quite small as well. Andre Fili's 5'11". Nathaniel Wood's 5'6". And he's not like a 5'6", like built up like Volkanovski. He's a 5'6" bantamweight that just can't make 135, and now he fights at featherweight. So I don't know how I feel about the commitment to 145. I hope Nathaniel Wood is getting a little bit bigger, putting on a little bit of muscle. But he still managed to beat good guys like Charles Rosa and Charles Jourdain. And in his last fight, I think he can beat Andre Fili by decision in this matchup. I think on the feet, he can be a little bit more technical, fight from range. even though he's got a significant reach disadvantage. I think he can get takedowns on Andre Fili as well if he needs to. Andre Fili did have success against Bill Algeo in the grappling. It was a very, very close fight that could have gone either way, but I'm going to go with Nathaniel Wood to win this matchup here. I mean, I don't know how close of a fight it's going to be, but Andre Fili's got a chance to pull off an upset with a finish, because we all know how good Andre Fili can be. But I'm going to be going with Nathaniel Wood to win this matchup here. It's an interesting fight. I do want to see the Nathaniel Wood versus Lerone Murphy fight, because they both don't like each other. But I'll move on to the co-main event. Molly McCann versus Yulia Stoliarenko. I don't know how I feel about this fight. I was very negative about it in my initial prediction video, because I genuinely don't think Yulia Stoliarenko is making the 125. I mean, she fainted on the scales weighing at 135. I'm seeing people say stuff like her last fight, it was she weighed at 139.5 pounds. I think they're very mistaken. That fight was not a weight miss at 135 for Stoliarenko. That was a catch weight bout. But I guess people just don't have critical thinking or can't be bothered doing the research themselves. But whatever. That fight was a catch weight at 140 pounds with Chelsea Chandler. But yeah, it is true. She struggles making 135. She does. And we've seen her struggle to make 135, and she's made weight. We've seen her struggle to make 135 pounds, and she's missed weight. We've seen her faint on the scales. We've seen all sorts of things with Stoliarenko, and now she's trying to commit a move down to 125 pounds. I don't know how I feel about this, man, like, at all, but it is pretty obvious to anyone that actually does have critical thinking skills, which is not that many people. You would be surprised, but that UFC wants Molly McCann to win this fight, and they are hoping that Molly McCann gets a KO in this one here. Now, Yulia Stoliarenko, she's got that left way background, which is just an insane martial art, to be honest. But I think Molly McCann, as I said, the UFC wants her to finish Stoliarenko on the feet, because she's got a chance, because Stoliarenko on the feet isn't very good. She is pretty hittable, but man, she gets it done in the grappling, in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and very specifically in armbars. Like, most of her wins are an armbar in the first round. She armbarred Jessica Rose Clark in 42 seconds. And before that, her last armbar win was in 2019, but it was in 20 seconds. And then just more armbar wins under 30 seconds. It's absolutely crazy how she manages to win fights. And then armbar truly is just her go-to. But Molly McCann as well. Like, one thing I noticed when I saw her fight against Erin Blanchfield, and I understand it's a completely different level. But when Erin Blanchfield was on top of Molly McCann had absolutely nothing for her. Erin Blanchfield was transitioning very smoothly, very easily. Molly McCann could not get her off her at all. Molly McCann had nothing for Blanchfield. So, if Stoliarenko can get on top and try working her submissions, things could get interesting. Stoliarenko could submit Molly McCann, which would be kind of hilarious, because I think at this point Molly McCann is starting to get a little bit unbearable, personally. But I think McCann does win this fight. I think she does beat Stoliarenko. I think she wins by decision, but a KO wouldn't be surprising too much to me. She is a good boxer as McCann. She's a good wrestler. She shouldn't be trying to take down Stoliarenko, though. I think McCann... God, I mean, I'm not even that confident in McCann. Like, I know she's a minus 350 favorite, but like, if Stoliarenko makes weight at 125, looks significantly bigger than McCann, she could be able to pull off a crazy upset, and I wouldn't even be that surprised. But I'm going to go with McCann to win this fight by decision. I think she can get it done. She needs to avoid the grappling at all costs. She needs to make sure she never gets on bottom, and she just needs to fight this fight in a boxing fight. She needs to strike with Yulia Stoliarenko, who I said is hittable and not that good on the feet, despite having a left way background. And now we've got the main event, Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. I'm going to be going with Tom Aspinall in this matchup. I'm pretty confident in it. I think he can get a finish within the first 3 rounds. Most likely the first 2 rounds. I mean, all of Tom Aspinall's wins are by finish, and he is a very good fighter. On the feet, he's a good boxer, like he wanted to be a boxer. And he's also got that black belt in BJJ as well, which transitions very well into MMA, especially at the heavyweight division. Because at heavyweight, let's be honest, a lot of the guys at heavyweight at this point are not that technical. A lot of them are quite old. And Marcin Tybura is one of those guys. He's almost 38 years old. And he's not that technical on the feet. You know, like, he didn't look that great. I don't think he looked that great on the feet against a completely gassed out, absolutely nothing left Alexander Romanov in his win before he beat Blagoy Ivanov. And that fight was just a sloppy mess between 2 guys that were quite old, that were not very technical. Like, I mean, Tom Aspinall runs through these kinds of fighters, and that's why he's such a big favorite, because he's such a good technical fighter. He's a great grappler as well. He can get it done on the feet. Like, he's very aggressive. Like, I mean, his win over Alexander Volkov is just flawless. It's absolutely flawless. A great win. His fight against Curtis Blades was very, very unfortunate, but I think it might not be the worst thing for Tom Aspinall, because now he's taken a lot of time off. You know, I mean, a year is a long time to recover. Now, I understand that most of it would have been injury recovery, but I'm sure like he could have slowed down, looked back at things, let things play out at heavyweight, see where he can fit into it. And now he's back. I think he beats Marcin Tybura. It's a good comeback fight for Tom Aspinall. It's not like Sergey Pavlovich in his comeback fight, which would be ridiculous. It's Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura. I think it's an appropriate matchup for Tom Aspinall to make his comeback. I don't think he beats Marcin Tybura. As I said, Marcin Tybura not very technical on the feet. He's an old guy. He's very sloppy. He's just going to want to he's going to want to wrestle Tom Aspinall, but it's not even that good of an idea. I think Tom Aspinall's going to be bigger. He's going to be stronger, more technical on the feet. I think he can pick apart Marcin Tybura from range. I don't think anyone has submitted Marcin Tybura in his entire career. So Tom Aspinall managing to do that would be very impressive. I think Aspinall probably hurts Marcin Tybura on the feet and either finishes him with strikes or gets like a club and sub, like he hurts Marcin Tybura and then finishes the fight by submissions. Give me Aspinall to win by finish within the first 2 or 3 rounds. It's a good comeback fight for Tom Aspinall. Now Marcin Tybura definitely has a chance to win. If he throws wild, he could catch Aspinall with something, but he's too good. He's too technical for that, especially at heavyweight, and I think Aspinall gets it done. So give me Aspinall to win this matchup by finish within the first 3 rounds. And that's my predictions, my final predictions for the card. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.